Hi, today I'm going to show you how I use Vectric Aspire software and my ShopBot desktop to make these nice dishes. This is an exercise in doing two-sided 3D carving plus the design work that goes into this. And this is about where you get after you've finished cutting the piece on the CNC. So let's go ahead and talk about how we set up the files to do this, how we hold down the material, how we do the cutting, and then talk about the finished piece. Yeah, the first step in making this dish was to design a hold down. So this is a wedge jig. It's just a piece of roughly 3/4 inch plywood. It's about 10 inches by 18 inches, the blank is. And the idea is that you cut out this wedge-shaped top with a rectangular-shaped bottom, a little hole there for the corner to fit in nicely. And while you're at it, you cut several wedges. You only need one, but you might as well cut some extras. And those wedges will wedge in the top here. And you can put your blank that you're going to cut the dish right in there. Put one of these wedges in there, and you're in business. Yeah, in order to make this, I just, like I say, I drew just a box there and just drew these wedges. I think that's a 4-degree angle up there. Okay, so I made some little circles here for hold down screw locations and did a drill tool path for that. And you can just see the little dimples there. That's where I drill the holes for the hold downs. And then just did profile tool paths for the cutout and the wedges. And so if I come over here to the 3D view, we'll go ahead and preview all those, and bingo, there you are. You can see they're held in with little tabs. Just got to break those tabs, kind of clean that up with a file or some sanding, and you got your form. Now let's get into how I made the model for the dish itself. I started out with a job size of, it was going to be 7 inches by 12. I found I needed to make a little bit narrower than 7 inches because of my wedge jig, you know, so it would fit in there nice and easy. 2.5 inches thick, so it's a pretty good block of wood. I used the lower left-hand corner for the XY datum position. And I'm just using a very high modeling resolution to get, you know, the most detail I can. I have to have an inner part of the dish that goes deep. And then I have to have outer vectors that show the, you know, the little lip around the outside. And I drew that about the size I wanted. And then went into the modeling tab. And went ahead and selected that. Went up to my create shapes. I knew I'd want to subtract this shape from the piece, and I knew that the height would be somewhere around 1 5/8 inches or so, and you know, a pretty steep angle on the side, and went ahead and hit apply and look to see what I ended up with, and there you can see a shape like that. It's pretty much what we wanted. I did the same thing, let's go back to layers here, with the outer ellipse, except that I made less of a shape height. Let me show you how that one ended up looking. Okay, I'll pick up the outer ellipse there. Okay, and if I go take a look at that, look at the properties of the outer ellipse, click on the property thing. Oh, got to select it. There we go. And like I said, I've subtracted that. Its shape height was much less, just 1/4 of an inch, because it's a very shallow dish. Again, it's subtracted from the model. So the inner ellipse first is made, and then the outer ellipse. They're both subtracted in order. You can see that this is a real flat shape, and in fact, you know, I wanted a curve like this as well. Okay, so I was going to go ahead and make the curved surface here using that curvature vector. And all I did was a 2-rail sweep along a top and bottom rail. So it swept this away. And so I ended up finally with, you know, first of all the inner ellipse, then the outer ellipse, which makes the lip, and then the curved surface, which makes that. So with my material, you know, being 2.5 inches thick, and this model, put my pointer in the center, almost 2.5 inches deep, that's going to be a little dicey, because that means I'll have, you know, less than 1/10 of an inch of material on the bottom of this. I'd kind of like to be a little thicker than that. So let's just go back to the modeling tab for a minute, and I'll show you a way to fix that. You just go ahead and check all of your active parts, all your active components, and go up here to this little icon that says Create Component from the Visible Model. And you end up with a component that is basically think of it like baking all 4 of these together. It's not really a bake, because you still can go back to these individual part components and work with them, but it's one copy of the visible model. And if I uncheck all these, so all I see is that, if I take that and go up here to its properties and adjust its shape height to something that I like better, like say 2.3 inches, which would give me the actual material thickness would be 2/10 of an inch, which that's not bad. You know, that's almost 1/4 inch material thickness at the bottom. In other words, I'd be cutting down into this 2.5 inch thick block 2.3 inches max. So if I just go ahead and close that, and from now on I'll just use this copy of visible model. So basically I have the shape for the top of this bowl made, and now all I got to think about is, all right, well, how do I do all the little carving on the rim? We know that the outer ellipse and the inner ellipse are those vectors. So this is the area we want to carve in. And so what I did was I made another ellipse that's about center line between these two that would be the guide vector for doing an array around following that vector, copying around following that vector. And all I got to do is make my shapes to copy. So I made some little triangle things. As a matter of fact, on one of these layers, I actually show these 2 little triangles. And there's my little center guideline that I'm going to follow around. And so I went ahead and took these triangles one at a time and just copied them around using the tool to copy object along vectors. Okay, you got to kind of play with this to get the spacing right like you want it, but you can copy that little triangle around your vector, and you can do the same thing with a complementary triangle. And now you get these little things that you can carve. So you can basically carve those little things, just doing little V carvings in between those triangles. If I just go ahead and show you what that looks like on the on the 2-dimension here, preview that toolpath, you can see those V-carves. Now, the trick is we want to get those V-carves down on the actual model. So the way we do that is to use a function called project toolpath onto 3D model when we make that V-carve toolpath. And so, first of all, we made the model, and then I went ahead and cut the model and used roughing toolpath with a 1/2 inch ball or 1/2 inch upcut bit, And then the next thing I wanted to do was the finishing toolpath. Okay, so let's take a look at that. All right, again, I cut to the model boundary. Now this time I'm going to use a 1/2 inch ball nose, and it's just going to go ahead and raster back and forth at a 45-degree angle with a very small step over. I think I used a 4% step over so that I'd get a pretty clean look, especially on these vertical walls right here, because when you're doing a vertical wall, it'd be that wall and that wall. If the tool's going like this, as it steps over just a little bit, it's stepping way down the wall, and you'll get a little ridge. That's why I had to use such a small step over, and even then you get a ridge that you gotta take out. Okay, one of the things you do gotta think of though is I got a tool which it maybe has a couple of inches of projection out of the collet, and you know, maybe the actual cutting length of the cutter, you know, is maybe 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, something like that, and I'm trying to go down, you know, 2.3 inches into this. So you really got to think about your strategy is how do you keep that tool from knocking the collet into the sides of the dish, and how do you keep it so it's not trying to cut along the, you know, along the shank where there's no actual cutter. So that's what my finishing tool path looked like, and let's go ahead and take a look at that in the preview. Okay, there's finishing up the cuts. All right, at that point, then I can go ahead and figure out you know, how I'm gonna go ahead and project that chip carving there, that V carving, onto the 3D toolpath, and that's the deal. That's what it looks like. Okay, you can see that it's actually put the tool down along that sweeping curve because I checked project toolpath onto 3D model, and that goes pretty fast. And so there you go. Now I've got the top part of the dish all done. So now I want to do the bottom of this thing. So I saved the file with a different name so that I could identify it as being the back. And so now here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and click on the combined file, and we see our dish there. And I know you can't see at the bottom of your screen, it gets cut off, but my cursor is right in the middle, and I'm showing about negative 2.3 inches on the little counter that's on the bottom of my screen. All right, so what I want to do is I want to make a, you know, 3/16 or so thick bottom on this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to, in the modeling tools, the offset model button, and I'm going to offset this model by negative 0.1875, which shoves this thing down 3/16 of an inch. And if I preview that, okay, it gets shoved down. So if I go ahead and just accept that for a moment, uncheck the top combine. So now all I have is this model that I just made, which is an offset version. And now when I put my pointer in the center, it's down at negative 2.5 inches. So I've essentially moved that model down into the wood until it's at the very bottom of the actual 2.5 inch thick piece of wood. Now right now this automatically came in with a combined mode of merge, and you notice that I basically have a dish, and that's not what I want. I want something that I can carve that looks like what this would look like upside down. So if I go to my combine mode, right click on that component, go to combine mode, subtract, it reverses this. And now I have what I would see if I was looking at the bottom of the dish. So now I can work with this thing. Except I got a little problem here that there's nowhere for this to sit. You know, it's going to be kind of rolling around the table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a little hat for that. Okay, so you got this offset thing down, but I need to make a little hat for that base. All right, so what I did was I made a little vector here. Okay, and I simply made a shape, basically made a real sharp shape, so a little top hat, and simply merge that in with the offset model. And when I go ahead and cut all this, I've got what I need. So if I go back over to my toolpath side, using the same kind of bits, first thing I got to think about is, hey, I'm going to send this 1/2 inch diameter bit way the heck down here, and it's going to go down 2 inches or more into the wood, and I'm probably going to be running my collet right up against some extra wood. So the first thing I need to do is figure out how to get rid of a whole bunch of wood. And so what I did was I simply made a big file called bottom pocket clearance. I'll preview that toolpath. We get rid of the draw tool here, so go a little faster. Until I have basically the upside down bowl, but I don't have to worry about running my collet into this extra material out here. Alright, so once I have that bottom clearance done, I can move immediately into a bottom roughing using the same exact tool. I went ahead and did a finishing toolpath on that same model using the 1/2 inch ball nose. Finally, I can just do a cutout. Now this cutout, got to think about this for a second. Do I want this cutout to go all the way through the material, or do I want to let it save a little material at each end to act as tabs? If you cut all the way through the material, all of a sudden this dish has gone wild. But I found it easier just to not cut all the way through, so these two ends act as tabs. So let's go ahead and take a look at that toolpath. Alright, now I'm cutting through there. I've cut down here. Now imagine I've already cut the inside, the other side of this blank. So in reality, I'm seeing daylight along here. I'm seeing daylight all the way up till around here somewhere. So that's it. That's how you do this two-sided cutting and get the model. So now let's go ahead and move into the actual working with the ShopBot. And here's the finished bowl. Well, it's not really finished, but we finished with the cutting. You can see I've got to cut around here now to cut her out and then do some sanding, but essentially it turned out fairly nice. So I hope this video was very informative about how I went about doing this. And you know, it's an iterative process. After making these first ones, I've thought of some ways to improve the file, and I'm constantly changing my my tool paths to reap some better results and some better efficiencies and so forth. But on the finished piece, I went ahead and after sanding it, I coated it with some semi-gloss lacquer. Makes a nice sheen. It's easy to apply, and it gets into these small carvings. And then I've tried doing this by laminating materials. This is actually a laminate of two slices of walnut laminated, horizontally. In this one, I tried a little vertical lamination, vertical slices, just to to use up some scrap material, because this really is, it's a 2.5-inch thick blank that you have to start with, which is pretty sizable. And so you can play around with things. In this particular version, I used the V-bit to make little S-shaped grooves all the way around. I'll get in close so you can see that. Hope you can see that. Whereas in the original, I did some kind of a chip carving effect. So there's all kinds of things you can do to get this. Another thing I tried using material a little bit thinner than 2.5 inches, and the result was I got a very thin-sided dish, which is very nice. So, hey, the sky's the limit with this stuff. Have fun, and I'll talk to you later.